A very pleasant good afternoon to all of our viewers. We want to take the opportunity to welcome you to Let's Talk. I should say welcome back to Let's Talk. We have been out for a few weeks to Let's Talk. Taken a break. I should say welcome back to Let's Talk. We have been out for a few weeks, taking a break from the whole year season. And now we are here. We are delighted to be back with you. We have a very exciting program lined up for you this afternoon. We trust that you're doing well, that the presence of God is with you, that you're enjoying good health. And since this is our first program for the year, it's appropriate for me to say a Happy New Year to all of our viewers, whether you're listening on SLC Church Channel, SLC Adventists, or you're listening on Second Advent Radio. We welcome you to Let's Talk. Today, we are talking about environmental health, environmental stewardship, our responsibility towards caring for the environment and how the environment impacts our health. In a sense, you may say we are discussing the whole matter of public health. And we have someone with us who is an expert in that area. We are delighted to have her with us. Before I introduce our guest, however, we would like to invite you to have a word of prayer with us. We always begin this program with talking to God. So wherever you are at this time, please take the time for us to focus on God now. Father, be with us as we go into this afternoon's session. We thank you for the privilege and opportunity to be able to dialogue again with our guests as we discuss very important issues and subjects that impact us all. Some issues we may not be aware of, but we're grateful for the opportunity to highlight these so that we can be more responsible in terms of stewards of our own bodies, of the environment. Grant us your peace and your grace in Jesus' name. Amen. So friends, welcome again to another edition of Let's Talk. I want to at this time let you know that in spite of the break, we are back and we will be going. We have some exciting programs lined up for you. And we trust that you will indeed make sure that you're here, that your friends are here, that you share the link with someone. This afternoon, on this first edition for this new year, we have a young lady who is our guest for this afternoon. It is my pleasure to introduce her to you at this time. I would like to let you know that she is a Caribbean person, and we are so delighted when we have our own Caribbean brothers and sisters with us. Dr. Lyndon Tellisford is an associate professor and deputy chair in the Department of Public Health and Preventive Medicine at St. George's University in Grenada. Many of you know of that university. She has a vast experience working with public health and private organizations across the Caribbean. She has interfaced with many regional and international organizations, including the Caribbean Development Bank, Pan American Health Organization, Canada's Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development, and International Fund for Agriculture Development, and many others. Dr. Tellisdale is a vivid researcher. She is excited about all things public health. She holds a Master of Science in Public Health and a Doctor of Public Health degree from Walden University. She has spent significant concentration in the area of environmental and occupational health and global health. As I indicated, she has done extensive research. Some of the areas would be pesticide use, health risk, harvested rainwater quality monitoring, antibiotic stewardship in food and animal production, some very interesting areas here, and climate change and ecosystems, among other things. We are just delighted to have her with us this afternoon. I need to let you know that she's also a Seventh-day Adventist, very involved in her local church, and in fact has had to shift one of her programs to be here with us this afternoon. We are so delighted to have you with us, Dr. Tullisford. Welcome to Let's Talk.
Thank you very much, Dr. Greene, and it is my honor, my privilege to be here this afternoon. I'm happy to be here, and thank you for inviting me to the program.
Most welcome. I'm looking forward to this discussion because you know, when we discuss areas of environmental health, areas of stewardship, areas of the impact of our surroundings on us, that is something that I believe is really important to Seventh-day Adventists. After all, we are Seventh-day Adventists. The matter of believing in God's creation should say something to us. So I want to begin by asking you a little bit about what you do. You focus on public health, environmental health. Why is your work so important in the context of what we're discussing today?
Okay. Yes, it's good to start at the point of public health. And I think most of us already have a basic understanding of public health, but just to emphasize that public health is sometimes referred to as preventive medicine. And by virtue of that name, we would understand that public health is underpinned by disease prevention, health promotion, and prolonging life. So what we seek to do as public health practitioners is to engage with the population so that we can prevent, through health promotion, the occurrence of diseases and ill health in general. This is central to the Seventh-day Adventist health message. Our goal is to prevent rather than cure. And I also wish to emphasize that public health is a bit different to medicine. It's important to underscore that. We prevent and we engage with the general population as I'm doing now. However, in medical practice, generally, if someone is ill, they would go to the physician as an individual. You get into a room one-on-one and you engage with the physician. So our health message really is about preventing our population, our people from becoming ill. And it is nice to see many of our Seventh-day Adventist physicians also involved in the public health work. Now, my area of specialty is environmental health. So being a doctor of public health, I also focus on environmental health. That's my area of specialization. And as a public health practitioner, as an environmental health practitioner, I focus on environmental factors that influence health, looking at how we can control, we can eliminate, we can mitigate hazardous, risky, if you will, factors in the environment so that we can protect human health and well-being. Now, you may also hear terms like planetary health. Okay, and this is more concern in that field about all aspects of the planet, be it living and non-living. You might hear the term One Health as well, right? Where we look at the interface between plants, animals, humans, and the environment and how that implicates human health. Or recently, I learned of a new term, One Welfare, where we look at the welfare equally of humans, animals, plants, and the environment in general. But all of those terminologies, irrespective of their area of focus, it boils down to ensuring that we as humans can live happy and we can live healthy in our world today. So this is what we focus on, and we do so through many avenues, such as research, health promotion, more like the education aspects, engaging people in different activities and so.
Now that is very interesting. I like the concept of planet health. That's a term I'm learning now.
Okay.
I like that concept because, it kind of says to me that if I can live in harmony with my environment, then that must be a benefit.
Yes, definitely. So some of the terminologies are more intimately focused on human health, but planetary health tends to broaden the focus and tend to say to us that just as you care about humans, you should also care about the other aspects of the planet, the other elements in our planet.
Very interesting indeed. Now, Doc, I want to, again, before we get too deep into the discussion, our listeners are varied. They spread across the Caribbean and extend to Europe and North America, and one or two other places in between from time to time. People come across maybe a YouTube video that is up and they watch. Most, if not all, of our listeners believe that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. For Seventh-day Adventists, this reality is even more significant. I like to say that if anybody else, we as Seventh-day Adventists should really give attention to establishing that harmony between the environment and ourselves. What is the relationship between believing that God created our world and caring for the environment? I'd like to get your perspective on this as somebody who is in that field.
Right. A very, very interesting question, because what we see today is a separation in our thinking about care and well-being between humans and the environment. So some believe that once we are okay, we don't have to care about anything else. But when we read the book of Genesis, we see that God did not only create man, but he also created all of the other elements within our environment. And therefore, it is impractical to be a Christian and not care about the environment. In other words, we should not neglect the other elements, the other things that God has created for our own well-being. If we do so, there will be a natural consequence. So if we really appreciate and recognize God as our creator of all things, and we are truly appreciative of God's blessings to us, then our attitude should be one of it should be positive towards the environment. Now think about this. Why would God spend time creating things if they were not to be cared for? Why would he create things that were of no use to us? So it really does not make sense. Everything that was created was made for a purpose. If we start from the sun, the stars, the soil, the plants, the animals, all of those elements or parts of our environment have a purpose. If we think about something as maybe the swine, most people don't like pigs around them. But even the pigs God created for a purpose, and it contributes to keeping our environment clean. So even though we do not eat pigs, right, as God has commanded us, but he still expects us to take care of those animals within our environment because they serve a particular purpose. God would never be happy to see us destroying his creation.
That's interesting. I'm almost tempted to ask you about, invasive species. I listened on the news yesterday of this discovery of this giant toad in Australia, and which they said has now taken the record as the largest living one, but then they said it was an invasive species and they euthanized it. So I understand, but we won't go down that road right now.
But I just want to remind you here, even though we're not going to talk about it, but that's where the one welfare concept comes in about how do we treat invasive species, you know? So, and that's why I said again, sometimes we have to use measures to control, to manage, you know, but in doing so, we should display an attitude of awareness, an attitude of acknowledging that, you know, these are still also creatures of God, created by God.
Yes, indeed. I would really like to know what is the purpose of the giant African snail. They're a menace in Antigua right now. But let me,
oh my.
let me move on.
Sure.
I want to bring up the issue of global warming. It's in the news a lot today. You know, this whole idea of global warming and climate change. Should we as Christians really be concerned about this? If so, why?
Mm-hmm. Yes, this is a very ticklish issue, and there are lots of different schools of thought about global warming. As public health practitioners and environmental health practitioners, we believe that global warming is real, it is happening. And it is not wise, I would suggest, to think that global conditions are not changing, including climate. And when we speak about climate here, it's a bit different to weather. Weather is what we experience on a daily, you know, daily basis. Climate is over a longer period, 10 years and more. So it is not wise to think that things are not changing. And that is by virtue of us as Seventh-day Adventists also believing that as a consequence of sin, our earth is not what it was at the time of creation. God created a perfect world, but it is not a perfect earth, but it is not so today. Things have changed. So let's look at the condition of the soil. When we were children, for me, that would be many years ago. Dr. Greene, that might be much more years for you, maybe. But we clearly can see that the condition of soil, the condition of water, the condition of the air, even the landscape, you know, weather is changing. If you speak to our grandparents, for example, some of them may tell you the coastline, the sea used to be here, now it is here. You know, they will tell you that even the kind of species that exist within our environment have changed a bit, right? They will tell you weather patterns have changed. Now, those changes are linked. There is the cause-effect relationship. One thing happens and it triggers off something else. What we have to look at and determine is the original or the critical trigger. And we believe it is human activity, anthropogenic activities. It has triggered a series of events in our weather and in a longer term context, climate. So over time, there is what we call natural variability in climate. Over a number of years, things would change. But God has created the world in such a way that it could have been self-sustaining. Our world was created with checks and balance. God is wise. Those checks and balance were in place to ensure that our earth can self-adjust and remain favorable for life forms. Human activities, however, have caused an imbalance that has resulted in things like climate change. So what we have is high concentration of heat-trapping gases, such as carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxides, etc. These are gases that we continue to emit into our environment, and they trap heat and act like a blanket over the Earth's surface and cause warming. And by virtue of that warming, you have like the ice covered areas of the Earth, which we call the cryosphere. You have the melting of ice, and that results in sea level rising because that water has to go somewhere, right? And heat, as you know, when our water is heated, you also have expansion as well happening, right? Then you have evaporation resulting in more intense rainfall. And then we have heat-related diseases, we have fires, etc., right? Should we be concerned? Yes, we should be concerned. It is happening, it is real, the evidence is there, but the effect is not localized. In other words, the countries that are contributing more to these heat-trapping gases in our atmosphere are not the only ones experiencing the problems. In fact, our Caribbean countries, small island states, are significantly impacted by climate change. You can just take a walk to the coastal areas and you would see. I was in St. Lucia recently and surprised to see close to the airport, the sea is right in the area of the cemetery, right? Sea level rise, right? The water has to go somewhere. So one pollutes, but everyone pays. And that is why as Seventh-day Adventists, we should be aware of climate change. We should be concerned because God is concerned about our well-being. And if things are going to affect us in a negative way, we should do our best to care for and to mitigate, avoid and control those kind of negative situations.
Well, I mean, this is a very interesting discussion on climate change and our responsibility. You indicated that many of the smaller Caribbean islands and other small states may not be as guilty in terms of the contribution they're making to the increase in the rise of temperature, but we all suffer the consequences.
Yeah.
Before I talk to the issue of what difference does it make in terms of me as an individual, I want to raise an issue here that, I had a conversation with a few persons recently, and they claim that this talk about climate change is a part of a wider conspiracy to push some kind of hidden political or religious agenda with links to last-day events. What I gathered from the conversation is that they felt that it is all related to some control and creating a platform for the justification of legislation that will lead to things like Sunday laws. These individuals were suggesting that, as Christians, we need to be wise. We don't need to get sucked into this thing because there is some hidden agenda behind it. Why is this kind of reasoning dangerous?
Yeah, that's that's interesting. Now, as humans, we will always have our own thoughts and perspectives about things. And the truth is, we live in a sinful world, and the powers that be sometimes may have their own agenda. That should not distract us from still understanding what is happening around us and doing our part to alleviate those kind of problems. It is dangerous for us to sit back and watch humanity suffer and only think about what politicians or lobbyists and other persons may be doing. We are responsible when we see things happening, changes in our environment, and because we are aware and we appreciate that God created our environment, we should be proactive in doing our best to preserve, to conserve, to protect our environment. We cannot run away from the fact that people will always have their hidden agenda, but that should not stop us. Now, we also should be mindful of the Bible's teaching that the earth will groan, as we say, pollution, tribulation, plagues, and so. And as Seventh-day Adventists, we again should be, and Jesus himself encourages, and he says that, look, I'm not here to take you out of the world, but that you remain faithful even while you are in the world. In other words, we are not living in any vacuum. What is happening is real. It's going to affect us. It is already affecting us. And while we have to understand the religious agenda, climate change is about changes in our environment that causes a certain kind of response or consequence. And there is a lot that we can do to control, to manage, to minimize that consequence. And I think this is what God is expecting of us. While we do appreciate that some persons may have a hidden agenda. Now, I want to share with you one thing I found, Dr. Greene, from a study in Grenada that highlights why we should not sit and just look at those kind of issues and not pay attention to what is happening to us. So in 2021, I did a study in Grenada. The study was paid for, and I was paid by the Pan American Health Organization to do that study. And it was looking at the impact of heat on people in Grenada. So I looked at the relationship between heat or high temperatures and hospitalization, number of people going to the emergency room, and death. And I'm not going to share with you all the results, but I just want to share with you a little piece of what I found that is now of interest in the Caribbean, and even countries outside of the Caribbean is asking for the results from that study. So I found that there was a steady increase in the relative risk of death, right? When temperature was 29 degrees Celsius and above. So at 29 degrees Celsius, the observed relative risk indicates a 50% increase in the probability of death in people who was exposed. When the temperature went up to 30 degrees Celsius, there was a 70% increase in the risk. And when it went to 33 degrees Celsius, there was a 190% increase in the relative risk. So it means that as Earth's temperature gets hotter and hotter and hotter, more people will also die. Grenada's highest recorded temperature is 32.8 degrees. So you see already close to a 190% increase. When it's very hot, people get sick. And by virtue of that, our health is impacted. This is what we found in Grenada. And this applies to the Caribbean region because we have similar temperatures across our Caribbean region. So it's something we need to be mindful of.
I was going to say, actually, you know, I mean, I'm alarmed by what you just shared. I shared with somebody recently that 15, 20 years ago, I know that we had an average of 31 degrees in the summer. Nowadays, it is between 33 and 34 degrees in Antigua. So if you are talking about 29 to 33, I mean, that is alarming because regularly in the summer months, our temperatures now are 33, 34 degrees.
Yes.
And so that is now, may I just ask, were you in your study, were you looking specifically at a certain age group or general?
We looked at general. So we looked at the mortality, the number of people dying, and how that correlated with temperature, number going to the hospital at a certain time. So there is a lot of scope for expanding this study. There are a lot of things still that we need to find out. Like, for example, which parishes, which age group, which gender is more affected. But at the time, PAHO contracted me to do a pilot study. So this is the pilot. And from that, there is a lot more we need to now delve into to really find out what is happening. Now, Dr. Greene, I dread saying this, but I'm going to share with you. And if there is anyone from Grenada here, they can bear me out on this. Death news at one time used to be broadcasted just before the news in Grenada. So news starts at 7 and that news used to be about 6:30 thereabouts. Now we have to give the death news, then go to the news and then come back to finish the death news. You know, you know, and we need to understand it may not all be climate change, but climate change in itself and the heat that we are experiencing. You know, look at what happens in Europe. How many people die because of our exposure to heat waves? And we have not even recognized in the Caribbean that we are also having heat waves, right? The CIMH, they publish it, but a lot of us don't get the news. We are experiencing heat waves in the Caribbean as well for several days, and people are complaining it's very hot. And that's why now we're trying to do more studies to focus on people who do what we call outdoor workers, right? Athletes and so, because we need to understand what kind of impact it is having on them as well.
Yeah, that is something that we need to sit up and pay attention to. Now, I noticed that we are the halfway mark, so
we are.
Yeah, let me hasten to say that, well, you know, next week we are going to go more into, by the way, I didn't say earlier, but this is a two-part series, so we're going to have Dr. Tellisworth back with us next week. And next week, we're going to look at some of the micro practices of man that are counterproductive to a healthy environment. But for now, I want us to take a macro perspective. How is industrialization damaging our world, if it is?
Yes, that's a very good question. And it's something that I focus on quite a bit with my students at SGU, because I teach environmental sustainable development, and we do talk about industrialization and industrial activities and how they impact on the environment. Now, industrialization has really contributed to mass production, our ability, because we now have machines and industries being set up, we are able to now mass produce products. And that in itself has, it's sort of, I don't know if it's a chicken and egg story. Consumption patterns may demand mass production, or mass production may have contributed to overconsumption or higher consumption. But industrialization in itself has led to us being able to produce all sorts of things now quickly. And so we are also consuming a lot more, and a lot of our a lot of the things we are consuming and using are not necessarily healthy for us. And then we are producing more waste, which goes back to the climate change issue, right? We are polluting Earth because we are consuming so much, and we have to discard of waste. Then industrial activities have led to the increased uptake of fossil fuel, which results in the emission of carbon dioxide and methane, etc. That again, these are heat trapping gases. Then you have globalization, and globalization is good. But what do we find? We also have the mass movement of everything: people, animals, goods, services, and so. And so you have also epidemics and pandemics resulting from that. Because as we move, we're carrying diseases as well. We're carrying pathogens. We're carrying, all sorts of things to other countries. And that taxes the health system a lot of countries are not able to cope when you have mass influx of people and the whole globalization process as well playing out. And then we have the exploitation of the resources. We have rich countries, for example, the US going down into other countries like Africa and extracting the resources sometimes in a manner that is not sustainable, but they need it because they have to produce for a large population, right? We have exploitation of people as well, people working in these industrial settings. So you have people who are exposed to a lot of occupational hazards. The working conditions are substandard and it's very problematic. And we also have inequitable control of resources. Those who own the industrial activities and the rest of us who work for the system. So in so doing, what we call the capitalist system, in other words, and in so doing, we have inequitable control. The very rich, the very poor that provide labor and sometimes are not necessarily paid very well. So there are many negative impacts, but of course, being able to produce quickly could be positive as well, because people want to use things. You don't want to know that every day, every few days, you cannot get flour, you cannot get rice, you cannot get sugar, right? Industrial activities drives those production as well of the good things that we need. But there are a lot of spin-off effects that are also adverse and contributes to pollution and damaging our environment, which in turn comes back to us as human beings.
So you may say that there's a price for progress.
There is a price for progress.
Interesting. Now you mentioned quite a few things. I'm sure next week we're going to talk about some of them, because you said, for example, that there are lots of things that we use that are not good for us, and it would be interesting to drill down on that and to get a sense of some of the things around us. But we did say that next week we're going to go to the micro level. So if we can maintain this macro perspective just for a little bit, plastic was a major development back in the 20th
That's a hot topic.
It is a very hot topic. You know, I still remember when I was in sixth form, and I remember, you know, in my chemistry class in A levels, we had to do a project, and our project was called The Wonderful World of Plastic.
Oh,
because
yes.
back then plastic was a great invention. It was touted as this major breakthrough. But I want to think that lots of people who are listening are aware of some of the damaging effects. Maybe not. Maybe some people don't even know that there are serious challenges to the use of plastic. So plastic was a major development back in the 20th century. It was considered, as I said, a revolutionary breakthrough. How is this development costing us today?
It's costing us big bucks. So, yeah, there is the wonderful world of plastics, but there are some things that we need to be mindful of. We need to be really, aware of with regard to the use of plastics and plastic products. So let me say, this is not a chemistry and a biology class, so I'll try to make it as simple as I can. When we talk about plastics, usually in most plastic, there is something added that gives plastics the plasticky nature, if I will, the elastic nature, the flexible nature. We call that plasticizer, right? So we have what we call phthalate plasticizer, BPA, and I'm going to speak about that a little bit. Just remember the short terms for now. Phthalate plasticizer, BPA, and other chemicals are added to plastic to make it such a useful product for us. But I want you to also be mindful of something else, our endocrine system. Now, our endocrine system that God created basically controls all our functions as human. It controls growth, it controls reproduction, it controls our behaviors, our endocrine system. And our endocrine system consists of what we call ductless glands that secretes hormones or chemicals. Ductless meaning there is no tube or anything. They secrete those hormones and so directly into the bloodstream, but they go to target cells and organs, etc. And endocrine disrupting chemicals can have serious impact on this function. Some of the glands that are a part of the endocrine system would be the ovaries. So ladies, think about that carefully. The ovaries, the kidneys, right? Thyroid glands, hypothalamus, the pancreas, people who we're talking here about diabetes and those kind of disease, this other sex glands like the testes in men, ovaries in women. Those organs are part of the endocrine system. Now think about it. When your thyroid gland is not working properly, your ovaries are not working properly, your testes in men, you have problems, or even your kidneys are not working properly, there can be many problems. Now, what is happening? We are still focusing on diet largely. In the case of diabetes, related to insulin and so secretion in the body and sugar control, and so we still focus on diet and exercise. And you know what is happening? Thousands of chemicals are flying under the radar because those chemicals also contribute to diabetes and all of the sexual or reproductive, I should say reproductive problems that we are seeing in men and women and other problems today. So let me delve down a little bit into that because this is an issue, Dr. Greene, that I can't help it. It's such a big issue for us today. So phthalates, they make plastics flexible. So we talk about things like PVC, even your credit card, your shower curtain, right? You get that smell, right? When you have new flooring, even the some of the cosmetic products, ladies, you would know that if you use nail polish, or even when you spray your hair with hairspray, you know that those things feel very plasticky, right? Again, it's because of that plastic type chemical that's added to it. Gives it a nice glossy, smooth kind of feel. And notice I spoke about cosmetics as well. Be very careful because we are exposed to plasticizers when we use those kind of chemicals, even children's toys and so. Now, we use those even in food packaging and so. Now, those chemicals, phthalates in this case, is not really bound or binded in the product. It moves freely. So it has, that's why we have that kind of flexibility. Plastics can bend and that kind of thing. Okay. But interestingly, the body also cannot digest or process or metabolize some of these products that are in plastic products. Right? We are not made to digest, to break them down. So they bypass the metabolic system and they lodge in our bodies. Now, BPA, don't worry too much about the long-term bisphenol A, is also used in certain plastic, in plastic production. You would hear about the recall of baby bottles, right? Plastic baby bottles because of BPA being in those bottles and those kind of things. We use it and it's used in those kind of processes, even to line tin food cans and those kind of things. And those are what we call volatile compounds like phthalate plasticizers. In other words, when they're exposed to heat, it evaporates, if you will. Okay. And that is problematic. And then we also have microplastics. Again, that's another problem that is present in the environment, in the air, in water, and so. And we inhale or ingest those microplastics that are not broken down in the human body. So they're leached into our blood, so to speak, leached into our body and cause serious problems because some of those are what we call carcinogenic. In other words, they cause cancer, and they disrupt the endocrine system. And maybe in another program, Dr. Greene, we can talk about the research that led to them discovering that those things cause serious problems. So what they have noted is that in some cases, when people are exposed to those kind of chemicals, in men, they find low semen count in some men that are exposed to those things because it interferes with the reproductive system. Some ladies have problems reproducing as well because of the ovaries. And I already spoke about things like diabetes because the endocrine system. Now, these chemicals, they can, we can avoid exposure to them by using more of like glassware. For example, instead of using plastic containers, maybe you can use Pyrex, right, to store and to heat foods. Okay. Now, those of you who drink water from plastic bottles should not be exposed to heat. Now, at the bottom of the bottle, you would see a triangle, and there's a number inside of the triangle. Safe bottles are the ones that have numbers 1, 2, 4, and 5. Generally, we consider those as the safer bottles to use. All right. The other numbers, you can have leaching of things into your water, and you might be consuming those. Try to use wooden products or ceramic products rather than plastic products. Do not store foods with oils because oils react with plastics and could be leaching the plastic into your food. So oily things should be stored mostly in glass, right? Or ceramic wares, okay? And avoid inhaling chemicals, okay? So these are some things we encourage because we see a rise in what we call endocrine-related cancers, cancer of the breast, ovarian cancer, prostate cancer, testicular cancer, etc. Those are what we call endocrine-related cancers. And these chemicals, plastics, interfere with the endocrine system and can contribute to that. I know it's a little long there, Dr. Greene, but what we don't finish this week, I'll try to capture again next week.
That's all right.
But I just wanted to emphasize that.
This is good stuff. I'm going to ask you to repeat a couple of things there because, you know, just to avoid somebody asking, I'm pretty sure. You mentioned a whole lot of things, but first, in terms of repeating, I just stretched across and picked up my plastic bottle,
Oh.
you know, and I looked at the bottom to see what the number was. This one has 1.
Right.
But can you just say that again so that folks can get a sense of what you're saying at the bottom of the now, of course, I have a background, so it's not quite clear here.
Right, just in the middle of the bottom of the bottle there. Yeah.
On this one, there is a triangle right here,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and it has the number. So
right.
You're saying we can look at the bottom of the bottle and
yes.
Can you just go that again?
Numbers 1, 2, 4, and 5 are generally considered as safe. We still encourage not using it, but generally those are considered as safe to use. 1, 2, 4, and 5.
Now, so if I'm in my vehicle with this bottle of water, I went someplace and they gave me this bottle of water. Thankfully, I had my air conditioning on. I came home, I placed it on my desk. You know, I do understand to some extent the harmful effects of plastics. But let's say if I left this in my car, of course, it gets pretty hot in the car.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly would happen in terms of the danger to me?
Right. So as I said, those are made intending to store water. Mm-hmm. So as I said earlier, plastics usually, and many chemicals like paints, adhesives, etc., they contain what we call volatile compounds, compounds that when exposed to heat will vaporize. You will smell them. They go into a gaseous state, mm-hmm. right? So when you expose plastic to heat, you have the same thing. Some of those chemicals leach. Now, I have had cups, for example, that I put water in, and when I'm drinking the water, the taste, you're smelling the plastic, you're tasting the some chemicals in the water, again, because exposed to heat, and those things are leached into the water. And that's why I said we have to be so careful. Now, number one, generally, you would notice that most of the bottles used for water bottles, like the one you have, they have number one. So there is less of those kind of chemicals added. Still, we recommend and we encourage that as much as possible, use a glass bottle. So when I'm taking bottles around, either I use metal, and even that sometimes you can have corrosion. I've seen that in some of my things, corrosion. But if you can use a glass is more stable generally. You can use a glass bottle, take it around with you with your water and so.
Now, you also mentioned that there is, the cosmetics. Ladies spray things in their hair to keep it firm, nice. And you're saying that the volatility of those substances is cause for concern.
It is cause for concern. And people who are nail technicians and hairdressers, they need to be very aware of some of those chemicals, not just for the sake of the plasticizers, but other chemicals, hydrocarbons that are in those chemicals that can cause serious problems. Especially, as I said, some of them are carcinogenic, they disrupt the endocrine system and all sorts of things. So chemicals in general, we have to be mindful of those and careful with exposure to chemicals. As I said, a lot of them are flying under the radar. There is not even research, as yet on some of them, because we have to develop research protocols. But the WHO already, from what you see happening within the family of that compound, is warning people to be careful and not to be exposed to some of those chemicals. Cosmetics is something that we need to be very, very careful with as Seventh-day Adventists. They do contain a lot of chemicals that are not healthy for us.
But perhaps next week we could talk a little bit more about that.
No, we don't want to offend the ladies. They would not come back on the program, Pass.
They could stay away and die, or come and get information and live longer. I think there was a time when we have to make a choice between looking good and living long.
Yeah,
so,
rightly.
But I really want to touch this. I don't know that we have enough time to finish it, but the matter of animal production for agriculture. I read in our world in data.org, an online site that was retrieved on the 11th of January this year, of course. It says half of the world's habitable land is used for agriculture. More than 3/4 of this is used for livestock production, despite meat and dairy making up a much smaller share of the world's protein and calorie supply. Now, Seventh-day Adventists have always advocated a plant-based diet.
Right.
What difference would it make if, in terms of food supply, if the world were to follow our lead in switching to a plant-based diet?
Yeah, that's an interesting and very good question, because I think a lot of people still think that they have to consume meat to be healthy. And I'll share my own experience very quick here. When I was about 8 years old, I stopped eating meat, about 8 years. And my parents took me to the doctor, and I was told that you're going to be sick. The child is going to be sick. You need certain things in your diet. You got to eat meat, And I don't have a tolerance for meat. So if you're cooking meat and I'm in a building, it's smelling good for a lot of people, but it would make me start feeling nauseated, not well. I don't have very good tolerance at all for it. So The original diet, as we know, was, herbs and our seeds and so from plants. If you notice the source in terms of the place where meat is produced, we refer to those as concentrated animal feeding operation or feed operations, CAFOs, right? And by virtue of the term concentrated, animals are reared in those crowded conditions. And that contributes in itself to an environmental problem, because you have this spread sometimes of, I don't know if this week you heard about how many, I think some animals, cattle or something like that, that they had to kill in some country overseas. I think it was England or something like that, because of the spread of some pathogen, right? Something that causes diseases in the animals, and then it's unsafe now for humans to consume. And we hear of these stories all the time. But again, these animals are grown in crowded conditions. Then we have methane being produced and carbon dioxide, etc., being produced, which again, these are heat trapping gas. So it has an impact for the environment. But then to protect the animals, they are usually given antibiotics in their foods and other chemicals to keep the animal healthy. And sometimes, usually, the antibiotics from my research, even in a small island like Grenada, it is not used prudently. So when animals are fed these kind of things, then we as humans consuming the meat, we are exposed not just to the pathogens or things like salmonella and campylobacter and other things, E. coli and so, but we are also exposed to the antibiotics and some of the chemicals that these animals are being fed. And when we are exposed to that, it implicates our health, one, but it also implicates treatments. When we use antibiotics consistently or we are exposed to low doses of antibiotics, when we become ill now and we go to the physician for care, and they tend to start at the lower dose before they go to the higher dose. When they start with that low dose, because our bodies are already accustomed to that and the organisms are already accustomed to that, then the treatment is not effective. And the physician has to beef up and beef up. Eventually, we are not able to respond to antibiotics. And that's one of the dangers of consuming meat. And then we speak about red meats and those other things as well, which the World Health Organization has flagged. Now, I see our time is running out, but again, a plant-based diet is best because we are able to avert some of those kind of health problems resulting from the consumption of meat. And in concluding, God is interested in our health. And if there is anything we can do to take better care of our health, I want to advocate and encourage us to do so. Remember, again, too, we're speaking about environmental health today. The environment is essential. It was created by God for our best interests. And let us take care of ourselves and take care of our environment. We are part, together with the environment, of one world. Okay?
Well, Dr. Telesford, I have to say thank you so much for sharing with us. I mean, this information is so relevant. I will. Well, the good thing is that it's online, so people can go it over again. We can pick it up from right here next week. Friends, those of you who are on right now, please note that Dr. Telesford is going to be back with us next week. We have lots of more important and exciting stuff to talk about. We are so very grateful for the contribution that she has made. And I know that some of you are already thinking about how am I going to change my lifestyle practices. We didn't have the time to go into the whole issue of, what can I do in terms of making things different for my environment. But we have next week, and so we will discuss that. Thank you so much. Our time is up. We have to go now. I want to wish you God's blessings. Thanks for taking the time, the sacrifice. I know you had to change your program to be with us, but that is We really do appreciate it. I was looking at the chat, some of the things that some folks were saying, and there's a lot of appreciation for the information that you have shared. So that's all the time we have for today.
Okay.
We will be back next week, and we look forward to another very meaningful discussion. God bless you, and have a wonderful, wonderful